This is Andrew Smallman for Gilbert and Smallman with an update on the Trayvon Martin case. If you go to our website at hgilbertlaw.com, you'll see that we have several videos outlining this, what's turning out to be a landmark case for the state of Florida and the Stand Your Ground law. Just to give a very brief synopsis, George Zimmerman killed Trayvon Martin and claimed that he did so standing his ground, meaning he thought that Mr. Martin was going to use deadly force against him, so he used deadly force against Mr. Martin first by shooting him. Mr. Martin is a black 17-year-old kid who is in a neighborhood where his father lived, or his father's girlfriend lived, and looks suspicious to Mr. Zimmerman. Mr. Zimmerman was told by 911 to not pursue, but he chose to anyway. And then the facts are that there was a fight, and Mr. Martin ends up dead, and Mr. Zimmerman ends up claiming that he shot Mr. Martin in self-defense pursuant to Florida's Stand Your Ground law. No arrest was made immediately afterwards, and that sent the media pretty crazy, and a lot of civil rights activists claiming that race was the main factor in Mr. Zimmerman not being arrested, and the color of Mr. Martin being the victim, a black victim, another reason why someone wasn't arrested. Eventually, an arrest was made. Mr. Zimmerman was charged with second-degree murder, which a lot of legal analysts think is a little bit of a stretch, but we'll see what the prosecution can do. Since then, Mr. Zimmerman was let out on bond. Now, here's where we reach the update and the interesting part. Mr. Zimmerman, at that bond hearing, his wife testified as to their finances. Part of what makes a bond hearing, it really is to find out what that person can afford to post bond so that their appearance is guaranteed to come back. The money gets released at the end of the case. So essentially what the money does is it makes sure that that person comes back to court, or the money gets vacated and it's gone forever. Now, certain testimony was taken during that bond hearing, most notably by Mr. Zimmerman's wife, who testified that he wasn't working and that she didn't have a lot of money. She was a full-time student. What the judge didn't know is at the same time a website was set up in Mr. Zimmerman's defense, collecting donations, and in fact the donations totaled over $135,000. That's one source of money. Second of all, there was some other money that was located that Mr. Zimmerman's family had, and that in addition to that, Mr. Zimmerman and his wife spoke in code while he was in custody about that kind of money and maybe getting that money placed elsewhere so that it wouldn't be so visible, so that they wouldn't have to post as large a bond to have Mr. Zimmerman get out of jail. The judge eventually caught wind of all of this and had essentially two choices. The judge could revoke his bond, meaning tell him, listen, that bond you posted is no longer good, you're to return to custody, and at that point we can maybe have another bond hearing, or he could be held no bond, possibly, pending a hearing. Now, the other choice is that the judge could increase his bond, taking those funds into account, the funds that were, you can call it lied about, or, lied is probably the right word. They definitely deceived the court as to what their finances were, and that's a big no-no. Anytime a judge feels that they were lied to, they take it very personally, and they take it as an affront to the justice system in general. The judge did decide to revoke his bond, and now a new bond hearing is scheduled for June 29th. Now, during the order revoking that bond, not much was said in favor of Mr. Zimmerman. But the only thing that is on Mr. Zimmerman's side is that originally when he was told that he was going to be arrested, he did turn himself in, and he has kept officials abreast of his location 100% of the time. And he also now has voluntarily turned himself back in upon learning that the judge was to revoke his bond. At the new bond hearing, I'm sure the judge is going to address the deceit to the court. The judge is probably going to address, I think that would probably be the main issue there. I don't think it's much of an issue to worry that Mr. Zimmerman is going to be a flight risk. Like I said before, he's kept the court up to date every step of the way as to his location. There's no real reason to think that he's going to run for the hills, and a lot of legal analysts feel that he has better than good chance of walking away with nothing here. That being said, we will keep you updated as to any issues as to bond. Trial looks like it is probably a decent ways away, and I would think that the next stage would be for the state to turn over a witness list and any evidence that they plan to use at trial. I would then think that the defense attorneys would be deposing these witnesses to make sure that they lock them into their answers for trial. There are going to be a lot of experts and probably some voice analysis experts on the 911 tapes, but I would say trial is a long way off, and we are going to have what's called a stand your ground motion prior to trial, where Mr. Zimmerman does assert that he felt the deadly force was going to be used against him, and therefore he decided to use deadly force against Mr. Martin. There are no direct witnesses as to the actual shooting, so it's really going to be one person's word and the circumstances surrounding that person's word and the other facts and circumstances which will give rise or fall to whether or not it's likely or not likely that Mr. Zimmerman is telling the truth. What I do know is that it's usually not a good start to deceive the court as it pertains to bond or anything else for that matter, if your credibility is going to be an issue down the road. Now, at a jury trial, it's going to be for jurors to decide whether Mr. Zimmerman is credible or not. But during certain pretrial motions in front of the judge, it is going to be the judge who is going to be the finder of fact, and those issues are more to the point, applying those facts to the law, and he's going to be making a decision. I think that Mr. Zimmerman probably hurt himself a little bit in that respect, but that's why we have our day in court, and he might have a perfectly good explanation as to why those funds weren't disclosed at the bond hearing, and who knows what he's going to say at that point, and who knows what his attorneys are going to say. But stay tuned. We are going to have more updates. If you go to hgilbertlaw.com. This is Andrew Smallman for Gilbert and Smallman.